So, have you ever been turned down for a job, or maybe a loan, and you just had no idea why? Well, the answer might be buried deep inside a mathematical model that you will literally never get to see. Today, we're going to unpack that exact idea, using Cathy O'Neil's incredible book, Weapons of Math Destruction, as our guide. We'll explore these hidden algorithms and the massive, often invisible, impact they're having on all of our lives.
Just let that sink in for a second. Imagine hearing someone you love ask that. It's an absolutely devastating question, and it came from a young man named Kyle Bim. It just cuts right to the heart of what we're talking about today. How can a system, one that's supposed to be efficient and fair, end up making someone feel so completely, utterly broke?
So, here's the backstory. Kyle was a bright student at Vanderbilt, near perfect SAT score and everything. He was just trying to get a part-time job at places like Kroger. But he kept getting hit with these automatic rejections from some kind of personality test. A machine, using a totally secret formula, had decided he just wasn't the right fit. And his experience, well, it's the perfect window into this much, much bigger and usually invisible problem.
Okay, so to really get what happened to Kyle and what's happening to literally millions of other people, we have to pin down the core concept from Cathy O'Neil's work. So, what is a weapon of math destruction anyway?
Right. So a WMD isn't what you're probably thinking. It's not a physical weapon, it's a mathematical one. It's basically an algorithm, a model that's making these huge decisions about our lives. We're talking everything from who gets a job to who gets parole. But here's the key difference. Unlike a helpful tool, a WMD almost always ends up causing real damage, and usually it's the most vulnerable people who get hurt the most.
So what exactly turns a regular, maybe even helpful algorithm into one of these weapons? Well, according to O'Neil, it's a mix of three pretty toxic ingredients. First, it has to be opaque. That means it's a black box. You have no idea what your score is or how they even came up with it. Second, it's damaging. This thing actually hurts people. It unfairly blocks them from opportunities, from moving forward in life. And third, it has to be scalable. This is the kicker. It can be rolled out on a massive scale, affecting not just a few people, but thousands, even millions, until it becomes this huge, powerful force that starts to define our reality.
All right, so now that we have that three-part framework, opaque, damaging, and scalable, let's go out into the wild and see where these things are hiding. We're going to look at a couple of really powerful examples where WMDs are already making huge, life-altering decisions for people every single day. First up, let's head into the justice system. So imagine for a second you're a judge. You've got to decide whether an inmate is likely to commit another crime if they're released on parole. Now, more and more, that decision is being helped along by a risk score spit out by an algorithm. On the surface, that sounds pretty scientific, right? Objective, even. But the whole thing falls apart when you look at the data that the model is being fed. And this is exactly where the bias, the poison, sneaks in. A fair system might ask a simple, direct question like, how many prior convictions do you have? That's judging you on what you've actually done. But a WMD uses a proxy for that. It asks something like, when was the first time you were ever involved with the police? Now think about it. For a kid growing up in a poor neighborhood that's heavily policed, that first interaction could happen when they're super young, whether they did anything wrong or not. The model doesn't see the context, it just sees a data point. And the real-world consequence of using a proxy like that? It's just staggering. Just look at the numbers from New York City's stop and frisk era. Young Black and Latino men were targeted an insane amount of the time. We're talking over 40% of the stops, even though they were less than 5% of the city's population. So when a model uses police involvement as a key sign of risk, it's not being objective. It's just absorbing all of that existing real-world bias and then baking it right into the code, essentially redlining entire communities as risky.
Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about a WMD that a lot of us are probably very familiar with, even if we never thought of it that way. I'm talking about the U.S. News and World Report college rankings. It seems like a helpful guide, right? A consumer tool. But O'Neil argues it's one of the most powerful WMDs out there, one that has totally reshaped higher education.
This whole thing started back in the 80s as a pretty simple idea to sell more magazines. But by 1988, it had morphed into this data-driven model. And just like the justice system model, it relied on proxies for quality. Stuff like average SAT scores, how much money alumni donate, and how hard it is to get in. But here's the crucial part. Over time, the rankings stopped just measuring the system, they started to control it, kicking off this incredibly powerful and often destructive feedback loop.
And this brings us to what is maybe the most dangerous, most insidious part of a weapon of math destruction. They don't just predict the future. In a very, very real way, they create it.
O'Neill has a great term for this. She calls it a pernicious feedback loop. It's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy. The model makes a prediction, say that a college is bad. And because everyone trusts the model, they act on that prediction, and their actions end up making the prediction come true. Let's break down exactly how that works.
Okay, let's walk through what she calls the college ranking death spiral. Step 1. A college gets a lower than expected ranking. So what happens next? Step 2. The top students and the best faculty, well, they see that rank and decide to go somewhere else. Then, step 3. Its reputation takes a hit, and the alumni, they start to close their wallets. So step 4, now the college actually is worse off. Its metrics for next year's ranking, like acceptance rates and donations, are lower, which causes its rank to drop even more. See? The ranking didn't just reflect reality, it created a new, worse one.
And this isn't just about colleges. This exact same toxic loop is happening everywhere. A model predicts you're a bad credit risk, so you get denied a loan. Without that loan, it's harder to buy a car, to get to a better job, or build wealth with a home, which in turn makes your financial situation worse, confirming the model's prediction. It's a spiral that essentially criminalizes being poor, trapping people in these cycles of disadvantage, all while being justified by so-called objective numbers.
So yeah, hearing all this, it's pretty easy to feel a bit hopeless. But the great thing about O'Neill's work is that it's not just about sounding the alarm. It's a call to action. She lays out real, concrete ways that we can start to fight back and actually disarm these WMDs.
And this is maybe the single most important takeaway. These models, they aren't forces of nature. They're not magic. They are human creations. At their core, they are just opinions, biases and all, embedded in math and code. And because we built them, we also have the power, and I'd say the responsibility, to hold them accountable and to fix them.
So O'Neill gives us a kind of roadmap. First, we have to start auditing these models for fairness and bias, just like we audit a company's books. And we have to demand transparency. We need to know how the scores that affect our lives are being calculated. Second, we need to update our laws. Things like the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act were written for a different era. They need to be brought into the age of big data. But really, the fundamental shift is this. We have to start demanding that these incredibly powerful tools are used to help people, not just to sort them, punish them, and profit from them.
Ultimately, as Cathy O'Neill puts it so well, we have to come together to police these things, to tame them, to disarm them. This isn't just about code. It's a fight for the very soul of our digital world. It's about making sure the tools we build serve human values, not just a company's bottom line. You know, math deserves so much better than being used for WMDs. And frankly, so does our democracy.
And that really leaves us with a big, lingering question, doesn't it? Because these models, they aren't going anywhere. They are the engines of the modern world. But they're always built to optimize for something. Maybe it's profit, maybe it's efficiency, maybe it's fairness. So the question we all have to grapple with is, who gets to decide what we're optimizing for? Who gets to embed their values into the code that runs our lives? And what do we do when they get it wrong?